Good afternoon. Critical Talk with Professor Dean. And this afternoon, we're going to address a burning issue inside the Muslim community and perhaps other communities also. But there is the notion that religious people, I can only engage in nonviolent activity, however that nonviolence is understood, or that they can only pray for the best outcome. There are other streams of thought that says there's some things one must consider before, as a religious person, engaging in activism of any sort. This afternoon, we're discussing Toward Sacred Activism, which is a text by Dawood Walid. There's also a site called the Institute for Sacred Activism, which writes in broader terms how spiritually concerned people, how spirituality connects with activism. So this afternoon, I have two of our favorite guests. One is Attorney Della Gregory Mitchell, who is the executive director for the CIOC, which is I always get the acronym mixed up. That's why I can't learn acronyms. The Chicago Council for Muslim Businesses in Chicago, Muslim businesses and organizations. I know I just totally messed that up. Abdullah Mitchell is a licensed attorney and a mediator and arbitrator in the city of Chicago, in addition to being the executive director for CIOGC and the chair of the Interfaith Leadership Development Corporation. Hopefully I have that right. Second, my guest is Imam Frederick Al-Din, who, though retired, is very active in a number of arenas. He was a criminal justice planner in law enforcement, corrections, and juvenile justice. He was an assistant superintendent, the Southwest State Corrections Halfway House, and a chaplain for the Bureau of Prisons for facilities in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Illinois. Gentlemen, on this really contentious issue, I need to engage you because the Muslim community is throwing out questions and having debates on how active should they be in all of the issues swirling around us. So let me ask my first question, which is, what do you think of all of this? What is sacred activism?
Well, let me take a stab before we let the Imam address this issue more accurately, maybe. Well, fundamentally, I think it's calling our attention that we have responsibilities as a result of our faith and our beliefs, how that should inform how we engage in the civic sphere in terms of social justice. And we have to examine those parameters to make sure, or whatever the issues that we begin to engage in are compliant within the sphere of and support our basic religious principles.
The Quran enjoins on us, in addition to what Brother Abdullah Mitchell has said, that we allow from our community resources, resource persons, a band of people, organizations, doesn't have to be all one organization, to arise that has become to a position of influence in the community and in the outer society, that has the responsibility of all Muslims to enjoin the right and forbid the wrong. The challenge that we're confronted with that is motivated this topic's coverage is the complexities that are involved in trying to do that. Because there's so many people trying to do this, apparently trying to do the same thing, that is to correct social justice. They come from so many different perspectives with so much baggage. We don't want to impugn the integrity of the concept of Islam, the Deen of Islam, by being known to associate with brands that are not necessarily in compliance with what the Quran and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to do.
Well, now, that leads me to let me give you a hypothetical. The son of my friend, another Muslimah, gets shot by the police on the way home. The kid is on the way home from going to the grocery store for his grandparents because, you know, with COVID and everything, they don't have a way beside him to get the groceries that they need. I'm hearing all this religious talk for both of you. Is she supposed to stop, grab her Quran, thumb through pages, and do a whole bunch of stuff before she runs to her grandson, or to protest an unfair, unnecessary killing of her grandson?
You know, as you frame the question, it really it does not run contrary to what we have said. As you laid out the facts, the aggrieved mother and the victimized grandson had committed no wrong,
right?
And there's nothing that runs contrary to our basic principles of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. There's no conflict there. The issue, and if I may just take the liberty of taking it one step further, is let us look at the circumstances now that we're confronted with in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where the man who shot Jacob Blake, when confronted with the police, was unarmed, did not comply with officers. Well, let me add one additional fact. Unarmed and confronted with police by police officers with their arms drawn and pointed at him, and then proceeded to go around his vehicle after being demands of the police to stop. Enters his vehicle with his back turned to the police officer who pursued him, and then as we witnessed in the video, then was shot 7 times. The debate that I've been confronted with is this is an unjustifiable shooting. The man was unarmed and was not fighting or resisting the police, other than resisting this command to stop. The flip side of it is that people will say, oh, why didn't he obey the police officers? Why did he stop when he was asked to stop? And once again, we got to begin to examine what are the underlying policies that are influencing our decision. And what should be influencing our decisions is what we understand, and not only what we understand, what we continue to work further to understand what it means to enjoin the good and forbid the wrong. For the apparent harm or what this individual did is not commensurate with the harm that was visited upon him. So when you have those that would push back and say, oh, he disobeyed the police officer, the question isn't that becomes the absolver of the policeman's responsibility at that particular time to use a more superior, more violent force to address at that situation. There was, even though they were called for a domestic dispute, there was no fighting. It was the interrogation, weapons drawn. So when we start talking about sacred,
Let's hold up here and get Aldine into this conversation.
Yes.
My point of view, I used to be a deputy sheriff in Cleveland County, Oklahoma, and I worked in law enforcement for some time. What happened, apparently, from what I've seen, just from what I've seen on the video, he broke away from the police on the driver's side of the car, ran around to the passenger side of the car, ran around to the driver's side and pulled away from a policeman who tried to grab his T-shirt. He pulled it open quickly and reached down in front of the driver's seat with the policeman right behind him. Now, the only thing I can believe is going to happen next as a police officer is that he's reaching for something to harm me because he's not listening to commands. And I understand he was also supposedly had been tased. So what do? What does the mother do whose son has been shot? One thing that she does is hopefully is benefit from a community wherein the believers are taught to study the Quran for themselves so they know how to use it in the appropriate instances. It's too late at this instance that in the hypothetical that Dr. Aldine pointed out, but otherwise people should be prepared by their membership in Muslim communities to live in complex societies with different types of personalities and different situations. People should know the situation in their neighborhood. We had a armed robbery right down the street from my house just the other day. Now, what I'm doing is contacting everybody I can is find out the details of what happened so that I have a better picture of what my community is like so I can make better efforts to prepare myself and my household should something like that happen. So the answer in brief is the mother should have been able to fall back on education that her community provided her and guided her towards on how to survive in this type of urban society. And then that she would have been able better to know what actions to take and who to contact to get the matter resolved, even though it would have been too late for her son. So education, timely guidance is what is critical to situations like this.
So what most of you are saying is that our Friday kind of assembly meetings where you can reach the most Muslims, whether it's online or, in person, should some of that time be dedicated to educating communities on positionality. Is that what you all are saying? I mean, because you go to the Juma and you learn what somebody did 14 centuries ago, or how the praise for the wudu, but you don't learn anything about how you are to assess the environment that you're currently in.
I'm saying that Juma and other occasions that should be set up and put on the calendar of every masjid, every prayer is a time for education as well as worship. Prayer is not just prayer. Salat is also the opportunity for education. What were the ayats or the surah that the Imam recited in the prayer? People should know what they were and be given a short, brief lesson on how what the Imam prayed relates to their situation. And in general, every believer has the responsibility of going to that great book, the Quran, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and studying it so that they understand it. And that means they have to have somebody who's willing to let them ask questions. What about it? What does the Quran say about pornography? What does the Quran say about gentlemen's clubs? What does the Quran say about drugs? What does the Quran say about different issues? And through discussions that should be led by someone who is not too pious to talk about such things, should be conducted so that people are prepared for life in this society or any society where Muslims are found.
Let's take a break and we'll come back. Attorney Mitchell and I would like for you to weigh in on this because Imam Al-Din just threw every issue in the book there, so we're going to have to parse them out. All right? Thank you.
All right.
Open up your eyes.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, it's your brother Zain Bika from South Africa. One of the first educational programs ever produced for Muslim children was the ever popular Adam's World series. The colorful and comical Muslim puppets stole the heart of a generation. Sound Vision will be releasing brand new episodes of Adam's World with the launch of a Adam's World app. Subscribers will enjoy new Adam's World episodes as they are released, as well as all the classic episodes of Adam's World. So visit adamsworldapp.com now to learn more, subscribe and enjoy new adventures of Adam and his friends. And let's keep helping tomorrow's Muslims today. Assalamu alaikum.
It's Adam's World. Believe me, there's a lot to see. Bismillah, let's explore.
What was it like when you started this network out, when you started Sound Vision those many years ago?
You know, after 9/11, one lady called me and she says, what is your channel which I can watch? And I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a channel. And you know what she said? She said, then how America will know about you?
SubhanAllah. Anything you want to say to the people who are watching? That we had one sister who messaged that she grew up on Sound Vision. What do you say to the people who have been long supporters?
Thank you. Thank you. It is because of you we are able to do all of that. So the generation of Adam's World, you need to take it over for the next generation. And that's my invitation to you. So keep telling everybody where to watch. They can watch it on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or EasyThing MuslimNetwork.tv, or our YouTube channel, or our Facebook channel. And with your help, inshallah, ladies, the one who called me, what channel should I watch Muslims on? Answer is here and now.
Okay, after our little quick short break there, Abdullah Mitchell, please weigh in on, Juma can't be taken away to just become issue time. So how do you see what the man was talking about?
what I gather and what I would share relative to those comments is that Juma should not be limited to the recitation of historical events in terms of being storytelling. How does that inform one's behavior? How should one should conduct themselves? And let's tie this in to let me tie into some of the other comments made, because a term that was used, I call it sort of like a flashpoint when you say urban settings. You know, that's almost like a trigger that, oh, this is an area that has crime, the people are all going to rob each other, and you can't be safe. Oh, I never would want to go to a, in quotation, urban setting, as if it's a combat zone and you need to be ready to fight once you come out the door. And anybody who's in that urban setting is prone to violence and they will kill. That's a mentality, that's a mindset that is now infecting the psyche of this country. Mm-hmm. And it's when you look at, even once again, I'm going to revert back to the situation in Kenosha, where subsequent to the shooting, on the unrest, the riots, however you want to term it, and you had young white men going around with rifles as if they're going to a hunt and shoot.
They were.
And then to have arms. Now I don't know the facts. I'm just going to draw an inference on what I saw, and that I acknowledge the weakness of that as an argument. But to see a young white individual with an assault weapon walking through an area where they're shooting, and he's permitted to walk by, that's just not right.
Oh, but he also
and so once again, so like I said, is we got to put things. It's not just merely that we're going to adhere to these principles. We must understand the ramifications, how they apply in the society, that not what we think we live, but in what we actually live.
Let me throw something in there for both of you. Watching the news today, the media has turned this into, just as you were making reference to, an urban protest where there's violence. The fact that a man was shot 7 times has left the vocabulary. That it was no part of any conversation this afternoon. It was, what do we do when property is threatened? Very interestingly, they also put on the interview with a policeman. The young man from Illinois had an interview before he shot 2 people and killed them. And he was saying, well, I'm up here to help protect property and lives. And he goes off on his hunting party. Now, had he been black, the interview would have stopped and he would have been arrested.
Maybe.
In Kenosha, probably.
The issue is urban areas are demonized because of what has been allowed to go on there, and what the citizens allowed to go on there, and what the public officials allowed to go on there, about how they persecute or don't prosecute the laws. Urban areas are difficult places, not only for one ethnic group, but for all ethnic groups. And it's becoming increasingly the case that they have become a shopping mall for illegal purchases by people who have no fear about going into somebody else's establishment, destroying their property and running away to sell it for themselves. Those are crimes. And those communities in urban areas or suburban areas where the people allow that to happen and participate in it by not bearing witness as to who did what, what you see happening in the form of behavior is the outcome. And yes, it is what subsequently causes people to say, see, that's an urban area where they live, and that's how they live. Allah says something very stinging in the Quran, talking about knowledge needing to be disseminated in communities. If people don't follow the revelation and knowledge, Allah turns their communities into something called Qariden, where their young men are killed and the women are allowed to become immoral. Hashtag urban area.
They got Breonna Taylor who got dead. She didn't get a chance to be immoral, but she did get dead. But let's go to this book. We are framing this conversation around this book by Dawood Walid, who has taken an opportunity. I can't say whether he went to this this 1 year set of intensives that the Institute for Sacred Activism has or not, but he frames this book. Tell me what you think about this book today.
No, I think it's a reminder, a wake up call to the Muslim, to any person of faith. I don't want to, let's not prescribe it just to Muslims. Notwithstanding the author is Muslim, he uses Islamic texts to make his argument in the book. But nonetheless, the overriding theme is that our moral values are to dictate how we engage in the civic sphere, and we should not allow them to be compromised for the sake of supporting one side or the other. Wherever truth lies, that should be our call. That's the call that we should answer and stand with. So let me stop right there with those comments, please.
Imam Aldi?
Repeat your question so I make sure I address it.
Called Towards a Sacred Activism. What is your takeaway from the book before I go into the book?
That before you act or speak or behave, it should be guided by your understanding of what the Quran says and what you've learned from secular education, formal education. The whole idea is that since mankind is created hasty and reactionary, it's better to cover, paste over paint, subdue, dip him into education at the formal level as well as from scripture, so that he or she could act more deliberately and with reflection and reason.
Okay, but how does one, let's go into what Dawood Walid says. He says that this book, Towards Sacred Activism, is an attempt to provide concise general guidance to Muslims in the West regarding engagement in social justice activism from an Islamic perspective. And then he also says that Muslims need to recenter their focus on what is pleasing to Allah. I think all of us would agree with that. But, not a but, and we're confronted with a policeman's knee on the neck of an African-American man in the streets, and he refuses to remove his knee until he kills him. How much reflection am I supposed to do before I join with other voices who are protesting this obvious social injustice?
I think everybody who saw that policeman's neck, knee on the man's neck, Floyd's neck, had the urge, I know I did, to reach out and go to that officer and somehow push him away so that Floyd's life could be saved, but we hesitated. We hesitated.
I didn't hesitate. Another cop pushed back people who didn't do all this reflection stuff you all are talking about, who was going to push the cop off.
Well, he didn't persist. He should have persisted. I wish he had.
Oh.
You know, I think it's important to clarify one point here, because a commitment to follow or your moral principles, and here the injunctions of the Quran for Muslims, does not mean inaction. It doesn't call for a lot of deliberative analysis before you see you should take action. When we start talking about protests, even though they may be somewhat spontaneous, it's not as if they're instantaneous. It is. It does call for an assessment of what has occurred, and what is being asked of you, and what is being asked of you. Is this consistent with our moral principles? So to take to the streets and join those protests against what in this case, let's take the Florida incident, where there is empirical evidence that there was a wrongful taking of a life. There's nothing inconsistent that says I got to contemplate this and seek the fatwa from 3 different imams before I can take action. But more importantly, it does though is put the responsibility on us to know and understand what it means to enjoin the good and forbid the wrong. All right, now, and therein lies this whole dichotomy where our conversation is, as we are analyzing the flawed conduct of this individual who was shot, and to what extent that his behavior absolves responsibility for the harm that he suffered. The perpetrator of that. Yes.
So enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong doesn't necessarily have to entail a delay to reflect and ponder. Human beings have a natural reaction built in, just like I reacted when I saw what I saw. I'm sure millions of others did too, who were African Americans and Latinos. I wanted to reach out and push that man's knee off his neck, even if he pulled a gun on me. That's what I wanted to do if I was there. And I hope if I was there, that's what I would have done. But what has happened is that moral imperative to act has been reduced as an instinct in many of us, because we're busy thinking that if problems are going to be solved, somebody else has to do it for us. Our congressman, our alderman, somebody else has to do it for us, our preachers. When the bottom line is that when things go wrong and you're there to correct them, when things are wrong and you're there to correct them, it is your responsibility to act in the best way to do what you can do, not to get yourself hurt, but to prevent a wrong from happening. And the wrong that was happening for nearly 10 minutes in front of us was the murder of a human being. The problem now is there's a law on the books. It's called qualitative, qualitative immunity. Qualified immunity that says, unless certain conditions are met, you cannot convict a government official like a police officer for any wrong that he or she does while they're on duty.
Well,
and that's a law that has to be changed.
I think my producers got something a little confused. Hold on one second. Our author, Joe Ali, asked us to consider the difference between a moral response and a reckless one. You know, that I'm trying to think of the quote from the book. He's talking about moral courage versus a kind of reckless, it just you saw it and you responded. And I would wager that with some things one has to just respond. You know, you see a baby getting kidnapped. Are you going to go run and get your Quran and look up all the things that say I should stop the kidnapping? Or do you move to stop the kidnapping? Well, obviously you move to stop the kidnapping, right? And the other things, because these protests lasted over a period of time where you get a chance to consider actions. You also have a chance to speak out at the rallies. I would ask you to consider those things. I'll come back after a moment and we'll talk about moral courage and recklessness.
My wife, who she's a professor at the University of Cincinnati, who's Catholic, and by her watching and listening to our 3-year-old son watch Adam's World, she ended up taking Kalima Shahada. She embraced Islam because she learned so much about Islam and the other prophets. It really affected our life in a great way, and because of Sound Vision and Adam's World, we're Muslims.
I took my Shahada 15 years ago, and I actually am from a rural part of Ohio. And so I found the catalog for Sound Vision, and I ordered the tapes and the CDs and the books, and I used those, and especially for my little daughter, that's how we basically learned our Islam, and Islam entered our hearts through the wonderful works of Sound Vision.
Okay, assalamu alaikum, brother. I just want you to know that I love the Sound Vision website, that a lot of times when I'm looking for information, especially as it relates to homelessness, domestic violence, and women issues, I go to that website, and then I see what you've written, and then I copy and paste it, and spread the word, because the wisdom is there, so I can't do any better than what Sound Vision has already done.
Sound Vision is our survival guide. It is the organization that provides skills for Muslims how to survive and thrive in this community here in the U.S.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Anam, I'm in 11th grade, and I grew up with Adam's World, and what it taught me was unity, respect, and love for the Muslim Ummah.
Adam's World is the greatest show ever made. Take me to the Kaaba, man. I love that puppet.
Moral courage versus recklessness.
I think the comments of Imam Al-Din touched on it when he relayed his feelings when he saw the killing of George Floyd, and the urge to do what he felt at that moment was the morally correct thing to do. And we question ourselves, will we have the moral courage when we know that if we had pushed that police officer off, we're likely to be arrested at the least of the circumstances in terms of interfering with the duties of an officer, to at the worst being shot and killed ourselves. So I think therein is the question of moral courage. Some people say, "Oh, that's foolhardiness," because but that they're assuming that the police can do no wrong,
right?
And I mean that's why it says it's necessary to evaluate all of these variables. And let me make one more quick comment. The notion that defund the police as if the police serve no valid role, that they're all no good. That's the flip side of the term urban society or urban culture, where you're using a broad brush to paint everybody.
Yeah.
Because having been in law enforcement as a former prosecutor, The police serve a valuable role for all communities. The issue is we have a culture now that has creeped in law enforcement that doesn't respect the sanctity of life for Black people, and that must be eradicated.
Imam Aldin?
And the challenge is who do you work with to help make those changes? How do you get qualified immunity removed from the legal books? How do you get police officers to respond within the guides of their training that they receive? And how do you get other social services workers, we call them heroes nowadays, to be properly called upon on 911 instead of the police? Because many of these calls where police are acting crazy are people calling into 911 saying, call the police, send the police quick. But actually what they need is a social worker or a mental health professional to come on the scene, make an assessment, and deal with it from there. But if you call the police to take care of a mentally ill person or a person who's sick in other ways or socially distraught, what you're going to get is violence, opposing violent confrontations. And that's not what you want. So make sure that when you call for help, you don't necessarily call the police, but call for who you need.
Well,
and to help you do that, you have to be working with people who, while their goals may be different from yours, the action that you're joining them in is within the purview of the things that Allah allows you to do. And where they may be different in their values and beliefs from you as a Muslim, you make the point when you publicly show yourselves as a team, a coalition, that we're here to join with so and so and so and so for this specific purpose.
Okay, well, let me push back a little bit just for the sake of liveliness. You all act as if the police aren't people and they don't have their own opinions about stuff. These men who a knee on a neck until dead, shooting a woman in her bedroom till dead, shooting somebody in the back 7 times, weren't just neutral minds going to take care of a situation. They were minds whose mindset was something.
I think that's you, in my opinion, you've extrapolated too far from the facts to draw those conclusions.
Okay.
What I do say there is, and once again, we must not underestimate the role of culture and affects the predisposition of people. If you have, if as a police officer, you feel that everybody in this community is no good, they're apt to violence, and that's the mindset when you address them, then often you will have your guns drawn for nonviolent confrontations. Whereas if you feel that these people are not, even though when they may be strapped down with guns, you would still approach them in conversation. I mean, these things we've actually witnessed in our society. When police officers confront a white male with guns, it ends in conversation. And when they confront a black male that is guns, where there's a right to carry, I'm letting you give that as a preface, they approach them with guns drawn. It's a mindset that has to be challenged. It's a mindset that must be changed, because it is one of the root causes of the violence against African American people by the police currently, in my opinion.
And the other thing too is brought forward in my memory when a young man was talking about listening to Reverend, a prominent civil rights leader, talking about how he would respond in a confrontation one-on-one on a public street with a police officer. He said, what I would do is I would get out of my cup with my hands up, whatever the police officer said. Yes, sir, Mr. Officer. Yes, sir, man. And be compliant and obedient, etc. And the young man stood up and he said, well, my mama didn't raise me to be no punk. And and I'm talking about the difference between the approaches of the leadership of this African American community, which has been pushing this medicine called civil disobedience and nonviolent demonstrations down the throat of African Americans at the same time when we've been being killed by police and being murdered by each other, which is another problem, to the nth degree. And those are issues that have to be dealt with. You can't make a people passive in the face of their own demise. It just doesn't make sense. Eventually, they will rise up. I mean, we send guys over to Iraq, Iran, Vietnam, you name it, and tell them to kill willy-nilly anytime they see injustice. And we get them back here, and they see the same thing, and they're told, just let it ride, brother. Just let it ride. Don't do anything. If they slap you in the face, turn your cheek. Just let them slap you on the other side. And that's not working, as is obvious by what's happening in the streets.
And if I could quickly add, and once again, what is not being discussed, in my opinion, what is being ignored is the psychological impact of this trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, going to this, the Kenosha incidents. When if you get a chance to see the full video, you see after the shot, you see clearly someone who has some relationship to the man, a woman just jumping up and down in frustration.
Yeah.
You have 4 children in a car that witness their father being shot, and there's no attention being brought to that. All we're talking about is property being destroyed, in quotation, civil disobedience, and the need for respect of the law. The law also must respect the rights of the individual, of the human being to life. And that's being violated, but that's not being discussed. It's not about saying all police are bad. What it's about is, what are we going to do to address these wrongs? That is the obligation of us as Muslims. We see the wrong. How are we going to stand to forbid that evil?
One thing Congressman Cory Booker has done is he and 3 other congresspersons have submitted a piece of reform legislation to 142 U.S. Code, Section 1983, which deals with qualified immunity, so that people who under official cover of duty, like police officers and prison guards, can be held accountable either by financial loss or by criminal prosecution for when they do things like what happened to Blake and others.
One of the things, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying is, these are some of the things from an advocacy point of view that we should be, as a community, be engaged in, to identify. We must learn. And I'm going to take the liberty to do a promo here, Dr. Aldine. The Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago is intended to have a webinar series with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and then we intend to have invited not only that, but the Chief Judge Timothy Evans from the Cook County court system, as well as representative from Chicago Police Department. Because you can't reform something you don't fully understand. It is important that we as a community understand the criminal justice system. They understand what qualified immunity means. Is this something that we should be opposing? How should we oppose it? How should it be reformed? We must become educated. That's our obligation. That's a sacred duty upon us, to become informed and to learn and to know. And
one of the books
that informs our actions.
And one of the books that they should read before they go to that meeting with Cook County officials is a book by a young lady called Crook County, yellow hardback book. They should get that book and read it, or Google it, get an idea of what it's about, because the people that will be talking at that symposium must have something to say in response to that, what's in that book. Crook County.
Well, let me say thank you both for your promos of stuff that doesn't have a whole bunch to do with our topic today, but that's okay. I am worried that we're calling, before the pandemic, we got to call for meetings, town hall meetings, seminars when people could meet in person. Now that we're not so much on meeting in person, we're doing the same thing but another name. And people are still getting shot and killed and murdered every day. So you have basketball players saying, I can't play. What we're saying is, well, we want to talk some more. People are getting maimed and killed, and you still want to talk? I mean, at least 60, 70 years of talking. You ain't going to invent nothing today that wasn't tried 60, 70 years ago. Why keep talking in the face of wanton violence? Are you saying that we as a community lack moral courage and we can hide behind, oh, well, let's not be reckless, let's investigate, let's read Cook County, let's have some more webinars, let's do all this stuff all over again? Because nothing has changed since the Watts riots. Zero, zip, nada. But you still want to talk some more. I'm instigating here.
Oh, we feel your punches. And I mean, the criticism is valid because people have not assumed responsibilities to bring about the change. And once again, there is an order to the system that we have here. It requires us to be engaged not only as voters, but as activists to promote and demand that our legislators bring about policy changes that address the harms that you're speaking of. But once again, I think it's important to remind the audience, our obligation isn't merely to write a letter, as you're saying, and complain, and then after the glare of the media goes away, things go back the way it is.
Yeah.
The moral obligation to continue in this struggle until the change comes. And this is what we as human beings will be held accountable by our Creator. Oh, you moved your lips on one day, but you did nothing thereafter. You never lifted your hand to bring change.
Well, that's one of the
obligation. That's a duty, a sacred duty upon us all that we will all be held accountable for.
Well, that surely these issues have arisen in the Muslim community, and we have Muslims using the same text that the book we were discussing towards sacred activism as a way to be quiet, to complain about looting, but not complain about the evil deed or the deed. So it gets very, very interesting as to how we use religious texts as a cover for doing nothing.
Well, my answer response to you is that it's a misuse of religious texts, because the analysis only stopped. Oh, I see. There are those that are over there doing wrong. So everyone that looks like them, I'm not going to support what they're fighting for, and I'm not going to stand up against the moral wrongs that I seen being committed against them. So I would, and once again, that puts the burden, the obligation on us to learn, to understand what it means to enjoin the good and forbid the harm. It's more than moving. It's more than the movement of the tongue. Right. It requires the lifting of the hand to resist and bring about change that is desperately needed if we're going to rid ourselves of systemic racism in this country.
Let me thank you. I don't know what happened to my other guest, but nevertheless, we will revisit these issues. And I want to thank you, Mitchell, and this critical talk with Professor Amina Al-Din. We're going to revisit these issues because we have an election coming up. It's more than just about the president. It's about the Senate. It's about local politics also. So we're going to revisit these issues in the very near future. Thank you.